You know, the God of the Bible wasn't originally the God of everyone.
All right, let's see it.
I'm not going to keep the video he's adding to. Instead, I'm just going to respond to Dan and what he has to say, since he is the scholar here. If you enjoy content like this, where I take a look at claims made about Christianity and see what scripture and logic has to say, drop a like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Welcome to Veritas. So I'm not going to add chapters to this video because Dan, the scholar, doesn't seem to be as organized as I seem to be. So here we are.
This is accurate. Adonai was the patron deity of the land and the people of Israel, and all the other lands and peoples around them had their own patron deities. And we see this reflected in a number of different ways across the Hebrew Bible. For instance, Adonai is repeatedly referred to as Eloheinu, our God. The land of Israel is Adonai's inheritance. Even in Deuteronomy 32, 8 and 9, at least according to the earliest recoverable form of this passage that we know from the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Septuagint, it says that the Most High apportioned the people according to the number of the Bnei Elohim, the children of God. And then verse 9 says, and Adonai's portion was his people, Jacob his share of the inheritance.
This is something you'll see Dan do a lot, even though he opens his videos with,
Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion.
and closes them with,
It's just putting dogma over data.
Dan could very much less care about the data. We'll see his dogma as we go through his video. Firstly, the passage in the Dead Sea Scrolls of Deuteronomy 32 verses 8 to 9 reads, For when El Elyon apportioned the nations, when he separated mankind, he fixed the boundaries of the peoples, according to the number of the sons of Elohim. For the portion of Yahweh is his people. Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. I'm going to be quite honest here. Dan is the scholar whose expertise is the Bible and religion, then claiming that he only goes where the data leads. Well, with those two verses, where does the data lead? Well, definitely not to an imaginary pantheon with Yahweh as a lesser tribal god. This is something that Dan reads into the text. Let me break it down for you. Dan asserts, without any good or sufficient evidence, that El Elyon is a clear and separate being to Yahweh, and that Yahweh is lesser than El Elyon. Yet nowhere before nor after this verse is that distinction made. Dan does not have a single piece of evidence to suggest this hierarchy. Dan attempts to justify this reading of the text by later citing other verses. We'll handle them when we get there, such as the Divine Council.
So what this passage is describing is a distinct high deity divvying up the nations to their own children, Adonai being one of them, Adonai receiving as their inheritance the land of Israel.
No, that is not what the text is saying. If anything, the text is distinguishing functions, not rank. We need to remember that the term El Elyon means God Most High, and Elohim is a royal or majestic plural to denote God. We can see this with just one simple example. In Genesis itself, it says that Elohim created the heavens and the earth. If taken literally, and without understanding of the Hebrew language, can make it say, the gods created the heavens and the earth, but the word for created is the Hebrew word bara, which is a singular, not a plural, which shows Elohim is a royal or majestic plural. So when the text says Bnei Elohim, in this context, it says the sons of God. So the text quite literally cannot say that Yahweh is lesser than El Elyon, or that these two beings are even two distinct beings.
And the idea that other nations had their own patron deities who were not Adonai is also reflected in a number of different places and in a number of different ways.
Yes, people had different gods. Not everyone worshipped Yahweh. And yes, the text does say that other nations had other gods. This doesn't mean Yahweh is just the God of Israel, as we can also see in other Old Testament texts, but I digress.
So we can go to Judges 11, for instance, where the messengers of Jephthah go to the Amorites, and they're arguing over whose land is whose, and the messengers say, you keep what your deity Chemosh has conquered for you, and we're going to keep what our deity Adonai has conquered for us. Basically putting them on the same playing field.
Like I said, Dan does this continually across almost all of his videos. Judges 11 doesn't say or do anything of the sort. The text is showing you a negotiation over land. If you actually go and read the text, Yahweh isn't even weighing in his opinion. The text shows the messengers are acknowledging Chemosh. How does this prove that Yahweh in any way recognized Chemosh? Yahweh is there to protect the land of Israel. He could care less about what the other nations do. This entire allotment of land argument from Deuteronomy makes absolutely no sense if you also consider that the borders of these nations constantly shift. So if this dividing of land claim is true, how do you account for that? Well, we'll later see when he attempts to show God losing a battle, how he harmonizes this.
And we see it as well in the fact that Naaman in Kings, when he comes to get healed in the Jordan River, wants to worship Adonai when he's back in Syria. But Adonai is the God of the land of Israel, so what does he do? He takes some of the land of Israel with him, 2 cartloads of Israelite soil, back to Syria, so that when he's in the temple, he can worship a deity who can only be worshipped on Israelite soil.
This is also so extremely misconstrued. Dan is again reading something into the text that is not there. Saying that Yahweh is limited to Israelite soil is nowhere in the text. If Yahweh was a local tribal deity, he would not have been worshipped anywhere else, even temporarily. The point is to show that God's power extended beyond Israel. So why did he need the soil then? You may very stupidly be asking. The answer is quite simple. Naaman brings the soil as a ritual accommodation to show proper worship. Nowhere in the text does it say that Yahweh is limited in power or scope beyond the physical location of Israel.
And even though this is a foreigner, this agrees with, for instance, how David talks about it. When Saul is pursuing David, David complains to Saul, "Your men are forcing me to worship other gods," by pushing him outside of Adonai's inheritance. Why? Because you have to worship the deity who has purview over the land which you are on.
Dan really doesn't want to make this easy. By easy, I don't mean his arguments. They are trivially childish. He's supposed to be a scholar. I'm only 2 minutes 35 seconds into his video, yet mine is already 6 minutes long. This is so funny to watch though. Scholar man gets so excited about this part, yet it's the part to be the least excited by. This part makes the exact same point as the previous one. It doesn't show that Yahweh is limited geographically. Again, it's about proper worship and covenantal law. This video is going to be much longer than I'd like if I had to go through each and every misquoted and misunderstood verse. Dan is the scholar here that presents facts that are data-led, when in reality almost all his arguments rely on his own assumptions and assertions. So far, not a single example, even when taking all 3 of these points together, show you anything. This is something I wanted to prove about Dan, that being that he does rely on dogma. So far, everything he's said about the text relies on extra textual assumptions that have no basis in reality. I did say that I was going to cover the Battle of Yahweh and Chemosh, but perhaps I can cover both the Divine Council and that part in another video. Let me know if that's something you want to see. Dan has consistently made bad arguments on bad arguments, while pretending to follow where the data leads, when that is clearly not the case. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope I could show that Dan, the scholar man, doesn't really even understand the text himself, or at least that he twists passages to say what he wants by making extra textual assumptions and not following the data. Let me know if you want to see a deeper dive into this topic, or if you'd like to see more Dan response videos. I could just make multiple parts in response to one video, but let me know what you want to see. I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, drop a like. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when I release the next video. Drop a comment down below and let me hear your thoughts. As always, don't forget Acts 17:11. I am Brandon, this was Veritas, and have a blessed rest of the day.